And that's a perfect entry point for David Creighton, founder and director of Cordiant. David, of course, you've worked a lot with insurance companies and pension funds, and now you are at the heart of FFD as a board member of the Convergence Initiative that we've both interacted with over the last few months. Can you tell us more about Convergence, how it can impact the implementation of FFD and the SDGs, private sector development, and business growth overall? Thanks.
Absolutely. Before I talk about Convergence, I just want to say that we've already had mention of this funding gap. And being a private sector player, when the number was presented to me earlier this year, I said, well, that's interesting. And you were talking about somewhere between 1.4 and 2.8 or something like that. But then when the word annually is thrown on top of that, so this isn't just a one-time 1 trillion or 2 trillion or whatever it is, that amount annually is what the funding gap is. That's big. And as a private sector player, that's attractive. So I was asked to become a member of the Convergence board, which is still in its formative stages and is going to be officially launched early next year, because my past has been really focused on trying to find ways to mitigate risk for private sector investors to come into funding projects across the emerging markets, and Africa is a place that's been of particular interest and probably our fastest growing area over the last number of years. So Convergence, just to give you an idea of what it is a platform that has 3 primary lines of business. One is the new product design facilities. So that's going to be grant funding to help players go out and do feasibility studies and proof of concept studies and have funding for that. And then secondly, a market building tool, which is being populated by a database of past transactions, a knowledge library of different structures, and then we'll also offer forms of training and workshops and so on. And then finally, an investor marketplace. Now, this isn't an online stock exchange or anything like that, but it is a hub where different participants are able to come together with deals, with funding, and find matchups that are potentially going to work, go offline, and then carry on with that. So, big thinking. You know, there are challenges to this, but at the same time, the concept of what we are attempting to do is find ways to be able to crowd in the private sector. So the public players being the development agencies, the official donors, and so on, using their money in a much more intelligent way. So rather than just coming in on the funding stack, and I'm thinking more on the debt side than equity, but rather than just coming in parallel to other institutional investors and other donors, coming in a way that is perhaps subordinated and shifting the risk-return profile in favor of the investors. And I think that one of the challenges that we've all seen, and certainly my experience has been this, and we've had success with my operation over the last 15 years of raising $2.5 billion, but that number should be 10 times at least that. And the challenges that we have when we're speaking to private sector investors is that they have just this litany of risks that they feel are just not worth taking. And the returns, to be honest, are a little bit better than what you would get in your own backyard, but perhaps not enough for the hassle of going through it. So this whole movement, and I think it's very exciting, is to try and shift, A, that thinking, B, get the risk-return profile into a position that starts to make sense for these investors, and then crowd them in. So that's where we are, and happy to
You see,
carry on
we're,
discussing.
we're pushing the envelope, and that's what we need to be doing. So, thank you, David.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.